And this day on the 9th of Av, on Tisha B'Av, it's meaningful for us to have the opportunity to gather. Different kind of awareness, and then a movement toward consolation beyond today after 3 weeks of this time. A little bit of a quieter day today. Boker Tov, good morning, and may this morning be a meaningful one, a significant one, a morning of growth for our entire people and for our world. As on Tisha B'Av, and this 9th day of the month of Av, we are aware of the challenges and disasters that have befallen and been visited upon our people historically, and how it is that today it is our obligation for these not to be mere historical events, but for us to be aware of them and take them into our experience in our lives with our own. It's been our practice this week and going forward to allow two of the principles, two of the midot, of the characteristics upon which we may work, from Sefer Cheshbon HaNefesh, spiritual accounting, to be our to accompany us on our way on days like today. And these were chosen for this week and with today in mind. So please feel free to read them with me. The first one in Hebrew is Menuchat HaNefesh, equilibrium. Rise above small events, whether good or bad, that are not worth throwing off your spiritual equilibrium. And our second one for this week, Plishut, abstinence. Strengthen yourself against evil or corrupt thoughts. Seek purpose, not pleasure. Of course, traditionally, today is a day of abstinence. Today is a fast day. The act of withdrawing from eating and drinking and other activities of comfort is a reminder of the dividing line that often gets so blurred because of the privileged lives we live between necessities and luxuries. I find fasting, which I am doing this year, quite challenging. And yet, when studying Masechet Psachim and studying Talmud around Passover, in the last chapter of the part of the Talmud that's on Pesach, it talks about the need to fast on the day of the Seder, and says that even the poor person must fast leading up to the beginning of the actual Seder. The result is that the rabbis need to define what a poor person is, and that is, in their definition, someone who's had no food to eat for 3 consecutive days. That's not fasting. It's a reminder that we live in a world where, while so many still suffer food insecurity, it is in fact unforgivable because of the amount of food that is available to us and in our world that was not available to our ancestors. Maybe that's why we have such a difficulty with fasting and abstinence, is because we're surrounded by plenty almost all the time. And today also equanimity or equilibrium, that awareness today that our people have survived not merely difficulties, but truly cataclysmic events, and that the ability to stay together as human beings, as Jews, to connect to one another, to share perspective, and to strengthen one another can get us through almost any situation, including the challenging times of this viral pandemic in which we live. And so with that introduction this morning, let's begin as we do each day, sharing in our daily prayers. Going to do that in just a minute, as I have to make sure that I can access those prayers on the screen the way I would want to. And here they are today. Too many things open. So let's open ourselves, not just files on our computer. Let's use these words to open ourselves on this Tisha B'Av. Please join with me in the translation. Blessed eternal God, creator of the universe, you have fashioned our bodies with wisdom, creating within us a finely balanced network. To stand before you in prayer is itself a fragile miracle. Eternal God, we praise you as the healer of body and spirit. And we join together in our prayer for the soul as well. The soul that you have given me, O God, is a pure one. You have created and formed it, breathed it into me, and within me you sustain it. So long as my soul is within me, I will give thanks to you, eternal my God and God of my ancestors, source of all creation, sovereign of all souls. We praise you, eternal God, in whose hand is the power of all life and the spirit of all flesh. One can tell how unusual the observance of Tisha B'Av is in Jewish life, in that on this day, this fasting day of observance, regular Torah study is in fact a prohibited activity. Nevertheless, the reading of, and as we'll hear this morning, the partial chanting of the Book of Eicha, the Book of Lamentations, is our study topic and for this particular day. And so while we will not continue with Eilu Dvarim, we will recite the blessing for Torah study together. Please feel free to read the comment on the side of the page or the English at the bottom, or join with me in reading the Hebrew of the prayer. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Va'arevna Adonai Eloheinu et divrei Toratcha b'finu, ולפי עמך בית ישראל, ונהיה אנחנו וצאצאינו, וצאצאי עמך בית ישראל, כולנו יודעי שמך, ולומדי תורתך לשמה. ברוך אתה אדוני, המלמד תורה לעמו ישראל. We continue joining in Baruch She'amar before joining in Psalm 23. So please join me, if you would, on the left side of the page. ברוך שאמר והיה העולם, ברוך הוא. ברוך עושה בראשית, ברוך אומר ועושה, ברוך גוזר ומקיים, ברוך מרחם על הארץ, ברוך מרחם על הבריות, ברוך משלם שכר טוב לרעיו, ברוך חי לעד וקיים לנצח, ברוך מודה ומציל, ברוך שמו. בשבחות ובזמירות נגדלך ונשבחך ונפארך, ונזכיר שמך ונמליכך מלכנו אלוהינו, יחיד חי העולמים, מלך משובח ומפואר עד שמו הגדול. ברוך אתה אדוני, מלך מולל בתשבחות. And today on this challenging day, we join together in the words of Psalm 23 as we join the historical experience of our people walking in the valley of the shadow. With the Eternal as my shepherd, I shall want for nothing. I will lie down in a beautiful pasture. As I am led along restful waters, my soul will be restored. I will be guided along the paths of righteousness, serving God's higher purpose. Adonai ro'i lo echsa. Even when I must walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil when you are with me. Your strength and your support comfort me. When facing my enemies, your protection stretches out before me, sustaining mind and body. Adonai ro'i lo echsa. Only goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will live in God's presence for the rest of my days. In just a moment, we will recite Shema. Of course, it is the way in which our cycle of readings is created, that Shema and Ve'avta, the beginning of the Shema, is the weekly parasha at this time every year as we come to Tisha B'Av. It is, of course, a powerful reminder that Shema Yisrael has not only been our people's affirmation of the power of unity and the unity of God, it has not only been a central prayer that is the first one that Jewish children learn, that challenges them to make themselves part of a larger people, but painfully, sadly, This has also been a martyr's text. This has been the words that are the last one on the lips of our people as the ultimate crime is committed against them because of them being Jews. The crime of murder, the crime of genocide. These words have accompanied us in that valley of shadows. The powerful and painful stories of the rabbinic leaders of our people who were tortured and murdered by the authorities of Rome thousands of years ago, in the destruction of the temple and the Great Revolt, and who, even as their lives were taken, had these words on their lips. The stories and the testimonies, edut, the testimonies that we hear from the Shoah as our people were led into, were forced, they weren't led, they were forced into the destructive camps, into the extermination camps, and even at those times, the words of Shema Yisrael were on their lips. The human toll that cruelty takes is something that must be acknowledged in a day like Tisha B'Av. When we talk about destruction of the temples, we remember not the end of buildings, but in fact the painful suffering experience of individuals and lives taken. And so living in a world where there has been so much cruelty and where so much preventable cruelty continues in our world, we remind ourselves of our ancestors' experience and recommit ourselves to minimizing that experience in our world as we join together on this day of Tisha B'Av in reciting Shema Yisrael. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto Leolam Va'ed. Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha bechol levavecha ubechol nafshecha ubechol meodecha. Ve'ayu advarim ha'ele asher anochi metzavcha hayom al levavecha. Ve'shinantam levanecha v'dibarta bam. Ve'shivtecha bevetecha uvelechtecha b'derech uve'shochbecha uvkumecha. Ukshartam la'ot al yadecha. והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך. ויאמר אדוני אל משה לאמור, דבר אל בני ישראל ואמרת עליהם, ועשו להם ציצית על כנפי בגדיהם לדורותם. ונתנו על ציצית הכנף בתיל תכלת, והיה לכם לציצית, וראיתם אותו, וזכרתם את כל מצוות אדוני ועשיתם אותם. ולא תטורו אחרי לבבכם ואחרי עיניכם, אשר אתם זונים אחריהם, למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אדוני אלוהיכם, אמת. These words have a power to them because of their familiarity. And on a day like today, on this particular day of Tisha B'Av, it is our obligation likewise to turn to words with which we have less familiarity, the words of the book of Echa, the book of Lamentations. And Judy Miller has joined us this morning in order to share the chanting of the end of the book of Lamentations. And I'll say a few words after the chanting on why we've chosen the end of the book, on the possible meanings in it. But at the same time, we now turn to the chanting of these words, allowing the mournful tune of the trope of this day to speak for itself, as Judy shares with us the chanting of verses 19 through 22. Mi'at?
Rivka bat Shmuel Sarah. Actually 18, but that's okay.
18? Okay.
Yes. Har Tzion sheshamim shualim yilchuvo Ata Adonai leolam teshem Kisacha לדור ודור. למה לנצח תשכחנו, תעזבנו לאורך ימים. השיבנו אדוני אליך ונשובה, חדש ימינו כקדם. כי אם מעוז מאסתנו, קצפת עלינו עד מאוד.
Thank you, Judy, for sharing those verses. There are two different aspects of them. I'm glad, in fact, that you started at verse 18, because the image there is a powerful one. That in the place of holy precincts, we see wild animals roaming. Jewish ruins are a profound image on Tisha B'Av, on a day of this kind, on a moment where we can imagine that experience. In fact, there is a specific blessing that our tradition offers for when we see the ruins of a Jewish holy place, and I find it to be very, very meaningful. Begins with the usual introduction to a prayer, Baruch, etc., and then it says, Metziv Gvul Almana, that acknowledges God as the one who establishes the property lines of the widow. That the widow is mentioned in this context as one who is exposed, of one who is at risk, and that we're aware that a people at risk, a person at risk, is always, historically, has always been taken advantage of. And that when a people has experienced destructions, as ours have, and has lived throughout so many generations as refugees, it becomes a customary, thus the ongoing growth of anti-Semitism in our world, that weakened people can be victimized. If there's one lesson that we need to remind ourselves of this Tisha B'Av, is that the victimization, the taking advantage of the weak, is something that can brook no acceptance or allowance, that in fact it is our obligation as Jews to stand with and for those who are mistreated, those who are abused, those who are at risk and in need of support. And I want to also talk about this second to last line, which is also, as you can see on the screen, often repeated as the last line of the Book of Lamentations, verse 21. Hashivenu Adonai Elecha v'nashuva chadesh yameinu kedem. It says, renew our days as kedem. What does that mean? The commentators note that we would expect it to say, renew our days as the time of old, as the days of old. And yet it says, make our days like kedem. The commentaries suggest that part of what that means is that in the stories of the Garden of Eden, of Gan Eden, it places the garden in Kedem, in this ancient location, where imaginary location, where in fact the experiences described in that garden would have been in the minds of our people, where those things would have taken place. And so what could that mean? What does it mean that our days should be like as of old? It should be like the Kedem experience. I think two things are extremely important. One of those, on a day like today, where we're aware of disasters and the evil that's perpetrated against people as well, is that one of the lessons, as taught by Dr. Meir Sternberg of Tel Aviv University, about that story of the Garden of Eden, is that in that story there are two trees, the tree of life, which plays almost no role in our story, and the tree of knowledge of good and evil, and the tree of understanding why it is that bad things happen despite people's character or good actions. And this story is a lesson, so says our tradition, that we cannot and should not make a connection between the moral character of people and the quality of their experience. That in fact, understanding the morality of these actions is beyond human ability, and in fact is one of the core painful experiences of the human experience, is that we need to know for ourselves that when someone has good experiences, when they have bad experiences, someone is materially well off, someone is poor, someone is well, someone is sick, that in fact these measures are in no way a judgment on the individual, and that we have to always be on guard against ourselves about making these kinds of connections, about deciding that we know or should know that where there's smoke, there's fire, when in fact, when there's smoke, there's smoke. That in fact, each of us has our experience, each of us has our challenges and our realities. And in fact, the path to blaming victims for their own misfortune is so short. But wow, of any time that we need to stand with the victims and support them rather than blame the victims, if there's any day for that, it is today, where we say, Hashivenu Adonai Alecha v'nashuva chadesh yameinu kakedem. We must renew others and renew our days, knowing this lesson that we cannot measure people by the pain of their experience. If that's true, there is one other simple lesson that we get from Gan Eden, from this story, where they have everything around them, and then what matters is not what they have, but with whom they share it. So on this day of Tisha B'Av, let us remember the ultimate value of our fellow human beings, and that eventually our home is not a place, but is people. That, wow, a person can make us home in a way that no structure ever could. And let us remember as we move from pain into the act of comforting one another, that we do so with an awareness that we can be a home for others, and that we can help them experience a life of stability and goodness, even when there is little for us, by sharing it together. In this painful time of the viral pandemic, we share with one another the need for healing, the need to support one another and those who are there for us. And so for all who are ill and isolated and who help us at this painful time, we turn to these words of Refuah. מי שברך אבותינו אברהם יצחק ויעקב ואמותינו שרה רבקה לאה ורחל, הוא ירפא את כל מכותינו, יהי רצון מלפניך אדוני אלוהינו, לחל עמם ולרפאותם, וישלח לנו מהרה רפואה שלמה ועטרת שלום, ונאמר Amen. May the one who blessed our ancestors bless and heal all who suffer. May it be the divine will to provide healing and strength, reveal to us the holiness of life, the wholeness of shalom, and together we say, Amen. And so, having paused to reflect and connect, it's now time to remember, recalling the loved ones whom death has recently taken from us, those who died at this season in years past, and those whom we have taken into our hearts with our own. During this period, during the period of Shloshim, the past 30 days, we extend our condolences to the families of Robert Filler, Alan Fridson, Rose Rich, Benji Fruitman, Judy Gabai, Helene Frankie Springer, Margot Grossbane, Rabbi Mark Shapiro, Janice Siegel. And on your site on this day, Tisha B'Av, the 9th of the month of Av, we remember and honor the legacies of Morris Chasen, Louis Drucker, Polly Greif, Ben Kirschenbaum, Lionel Magder, Zelda Osak, Janie Rigler, Arthur Sermer, Lily Schrott, Ben Schulman, Edward Silverberg. Zichronam Livracha, may their memories be a blessing to us, and we take along with them into our hearts the memories of so many, those throughout the history of the Jewish people and humanity who suffered vile cruelties and disasters, and who left behind none to remember them. May we this day be their Kaddish as we turn to these words sanctified by memory, words glorified by hope. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah, be'alma divrach yiruteh v'yamlich malchuteh, b'chayechon v'yomechon, v'chaye dechol bet Yisrael, b'agala ובזמן קריב יאמרו אמן. יהי שמי רבה מברך לעולם ולעלמיה. יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא, ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי דקודשה בריחו. לעילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה, תושבחתה ונחמתה, תמירן בעלמה ואמרו אמן. יהי שלמה רבה מן שמיה וחיים, עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום, עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו amen. And a source of peace, and peace to all who mourn, and bring comfort to all the bereaved here among us, and bring hope to those who remember, and together we say amen. Well, this concludes our opportunity to be together for this morning. We will today, as we have on Thursdays, special for Tisha B'Av, but continuing in its series, have our meditation service led by Rabbi Sue Oren at 12:30 p.m. today, which of course will also focus on Tisha B'Av. And separately, this evening, for those who aren't aware, there is an additional report from the leadership of our synagogue just about where things are headed in the days ahead at 7:30 p.m. You can find the link on our website at templesinai.net. Hoping today is a meaningful and reflective day and leads us to a place of comfort and goodness and blessing. Take care.